Hello, podcast listeners. I know who you're going to listen to. It's JJ Meets World. This is your host with the most. This episode, gosh, we're going to talk about Ghostbusters. We're going to talk about animated series. We're going to talk about serials. We're going to talk about Ghostbusters doing it with other ghosts. You just sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
There's a new Ghostbusters movie coming out very soon, and a lot of people may be listening to this after the release of it, and so you'll have to beg my indulgence. The Ghostbusters overview that we're about to go through does not include Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And let's start with this. I have loved the Ghostbusters since I was a little tiny boy, a little baby boy, when I was just so young and thinking about ghosts all the time. The Ghostbusters showed me that not only could something be scary sci-fi, but also be hilarious at the same time, right? So it was really my introduction to Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis for sure.
This was the first time you ever saw them in anything.
That I remember, like something that's memorable. Like Bill Murray, no, because I saw the movie Meatballs a bunch when I was younger, because you could show a kid Meatballs way before you could show them Ghostbusters. But I was for sure watching Ghostbusters by the time I was 6 years old.
Okay.
Because I had a Ghostbusters costume by that age. And then it was just in time for Ghostbusters 2 to come out, to which my parents did not take me in the theaters.
Let me see. When you're 6, you were born in 83.
83.
So this is
89. Good old classic 1989.
Yeah, I mean, that's the 89 to 90 crossover year. I mean, that's when you get the first Ninja Turtles movie.
Right.
You know, that's when Batman 89 comes out. You know, that is such a pivotal moment. That
really
may be the peak of Western civilization. It really might be.
I mean, I'm not going to argue one bit with you. I mean, certainly on a cinematic scale, right? So Ghostbusters comes out the sequel comes out, and for a long time, I had seen Ghostbusters 2 more times than I had seen Ghostbusters 1. And I don't know why that is, but it certainly is one of those things where I remember the very beginning of that movie when the Ghostbusters are down and out and they're having to go to a kid's birthday party and be the Ghostbusters, and they play the Ray Parker Jr. song, and then the kid who's like, my dad says, like, you're a crock.
That scene has been a secret scene in my heart that I've always wanted to recreate if I ever were given the winning lottery ticket of like directing a Marvel movie of the Avengers. One where they're just not a big deal anymore, and everyone's kind of bored of them.
Oh,
sure. They're doing kids' birthday parties.
Sure, like Hulk smash cake, stuff like that.
They've totally commodified.
Do you remember who they're like, if there's something weird and it don't look good, who are you going to call? What the kids yell?
No, I can't remember.
He-Man! Which, again, gloriously 1980s.
Yes.
So I kind of want to go through the Ghostbusters properties leading up to this, because I've got real feelings about what happened in 2016.
And where does the Funimation?
It's right alongside it.
It is.
We're also going to talk about some of their video game properties too.
Okay.
So the first Ghostbusters movie comes out, and it's a juggernaut. It is massive, with the exception of being in New York City. New York City as a whole, I don't know if you know this, was so pissed off by all of the traffic that the Ghostbusters movie had caused that people were like full on boycotting it.
And this was 89?
This is 83 when Ghostbusters 1 comes out.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Also, do you know what opened against Ghostbusters? Gremlins. So it was like the greatest J.J.
Ooh.
Gordon weekend of all time.
Yeah.
This is midsummer too, which
Oh,
is
but
weird.
you were born in 83. You were
Yeah.
born this year.
Yeah, so like
So you
while
were
I'm cooking,
You were born the same year that Ghostbusters and Gremlins were born.
and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
That's like, that's being born under a good sign.
It really is.
There's
I
got to
mean,
be some scientific connection between the personality you have today and what was out in 1985. We'll figure it out.
Yeah,
but-
there's some good stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, maybe like Trading Places or something like that. So that first movie comes out, and Gremlins is the #1 movie in New York City, but Ghostbusters is #1 across the nation. By the way, Ghostbusters and Gremlins both stay in the theaters, I think, for 6 months. And
Wow.
are producing significant box office receipts during that entire run.
And I apologize for my ignorance, but I mean, there would never have been the hope of a crossover, right? Because Gremlins are not ghosts.
Right. And we're talking about Sony and Warner Brothers.
Right.
Yeah. Gremlins are they're an ancient Chinese mystical animal that starts as a mogwai, and then after it eats after midnight becomes a gremlin. So it's a whole thing. So I wish there were a crossover. Wait. No, I was thinking because in the Lego Batman movie, there are gremlins when Lego Batman goes to the where's the place that Superman hides, like General Zod, the negative zone.
The negative zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but there's no Ghostbusters in that one, even though Lego has a Ghostbusters property. Anyway, moving along.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes out, and Ivan Reitman talked about how he was kind of worried before this movie came out because you never know, like, is this going to be something that people want to see? And he said he saw it Saturday in Manhattan, and when he came out, there was somebody selling knockoff Ghostbusters shirts. They had already printed the logo on T-shirts, and he goes, and it wasn't quite right, it was just a little off. But he goes, well, that's how you know you've really made something that's caught the zeitgeist, because someone is making an inferior product based on your property right there, within a day of the movie opening.
I mean, I have never seen. I would love to put myself in the place of someone in '83 seeing the trailer for the first time.
Oh yeah,
like what is it that came out that hooked everyone, that made them go, oh, well, now I need to see this movie.
And really, in all honesty, think about it, Bill Murray was a gigantic star at that time.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he replaces John Belushi as Peter Venkman, because Belushi was originally slated to play Peter Venkman.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dan Aykroyd was already massive because he had Blues Brothers and amongst other movies, so he was a major success.
Mm-hmm.
Sigourney Weaver, of course, off that Alien fame, and you're putting together a cast that just is nonstop.
Rick Moranis, Canada's favorite son.
Now, interesting, do you know that he was not the first choice for that role?
Who was?
John Candy.
Oh,
yeah. John Candy was supposed to play Louis Tully, and he was going to play it as a German, German American, and he ended up having a scheduling conflict, and so he went to Ivan Reitman. He goes, listen, I thank you so much for thinking of me. I can't make this work, but you know who could is Rick Moranis. He's hilarious. And so Rick Moranis gets the job. This happens again when Disney casts John Candy as Wayne Zelinsky in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and he had to pull out because of scheduling. And he goes, you know who you should talk to is my good friend, Rick Moranis. So Rick Moranis, I think, owes a little bit. Now, that being said, John Candy does have a very specific Ghostbusters cameo. Have you ever seen the music video to Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters theme? So it's Ray Parker Jr. walking through a house that's made entirely out of neon bulbs. And so the staircase is an outline of a staircase in neon, but everything else is painted black. It's pretty out there. And there are all these cameos where it's who are you going to call? And then it's somebody going, Ghostbusters. So Terry Garr, other celebrities of the era, and then John Candy's one of them who does Ghostbusters.
It's probably the fact that they had such a catchy hook for a slogan. Who you going to call? Ghostbusters.
Yep.
That's an earworm right there.
Perfect.
That's probably the main core piece that embedded itself into people's brains and then took over.
all of the Ghostbusters make a cameo in the Ghostbusters music video as well. And that's where the iconic, like the walk that you see in like the Real Ghostbusters like cartoon. So they're doing that down the streets of New York, and Bill Murray, like they come upon a piece of cardboard and you're like, this is definitely improvised, where like Bill Murray sees it and then he like gets down and like does some what's that kind of dancing called where you like dance on the kids dance on the cardboard and like break dancing. Yes. He broke dance.
What's that kind of dancing the kids do on the cardboard?
Right? Before they eat their multivitamin. So the movie comes out, it's a juggernaut. They were not prepared. They did not have toys ready. I don't think that they really knew how much like kids, younger people were going to really get into this.
Right. I mean, at that moment, the movie merchandising juggernaut was Star Wars.
Bingo.
And I don't know of many others that were being able to latch onto that success. And maybe they thought it might have just been at the level of investors going, we want to see if this takes off before we try to make, try to fire up a bunch of plastic factories to start making all this useless stuff that we're going to sell, though, like big time.
But I mean, that was the name of the game. It even still is today, where sometimes they'll just send portions of the script over to toy makers, and toy makers will look at it and be like, oh, okay, I guess.
Right.
Judging from this, roses are going to be a big thing. So we'll make a rose that eats people, and then who knows if it actually matches up with what they need. But they want to be able to release toys at the same time as a movie's coming out, so that they can, they can really ride that. And this was also an era too where custom birthday like kits were coming out, and so you could get Ghostbusters plates and you could get Ghostbusters party hats and all sorts of stuff like that. So Ghostbusters comes out, huge success. Of course, immediately they're like, Ghostbusters 2, when are we going to see Ghostbusters 2? Ghostbusters 2 would be great. And we have to wait until 89 to get Ghostbusters 2. And a lot of people rag on Ghostbusters 2 for being just a crap sequel. I like Ghostbusters 2. There's enough in there that's fun. I love how they incorporate the ooze. The scene at the beginning, or I guess probably like a third of the way through, before they get to be Ghostbusters again, that takes place at the trial, is one of my favorite. My wife and I quote this all the time when the judge is yelling at them and the ooze is reacting to his negative energy. And then all of a sudden the two guys pop out and they're in electric chairs, and the judge goes, "This is Scoleri brothers! Tried them for murder! Gave them both the chair!" It's so good.
I mean, as it, even if it's good or not, that the time capsule of it, the time and place, the sensibility of how they even made the movie, it's not made like that anymore.
Okay, I should have gone back to the original. I'm going to go back to the original Ghostbusters real quick
because I've got a question about that.
Okay,
as well.
I've got questions for you too.
Okay,
number one, first and foremost, is the scene where Rick Moranis is being chased by the dog one of the scariest moments you watched in movies as a kid, when like he gets to like the Tavern on the Green and he's up against the glass window and and you see the like demon dog coming towards him. Like, they used to scare the shit out of me.
I do remember it being intense. It wasn't nearly as intense to me as trying to watch the Rancor scene in Return of the Jedi.
Oh,
that would make me hide behind a couch.
I kind of feel like maybe it was the same group doing the effect. Well, I mean, Richard Egland, who we had on the podcast, did the effects for not only Star Wars films, but also for the Ghostbusters franchise.
Yeah. I mean, that demon dog is scary.
It is scary.
Even when you see the sort of the bad Matt cut out, stop motion, even those moments don't like break the illusion enough to make you not go through it.
I think because it's mostly practical effects for as many things they do. Like, so when Dana Barrett sits down in that chair after she kind of feels uneasy, and there are like these demon hands that rip through the chair and hold her down. By the way, one of them like clearly just grabs her breast. And I used to think like that's, like that person probably got in big trouble, right?
Yeah,
like,
they
should have been so
They
handsy.
didn't have an intimacy coordinator
They
probably
did
on
not.
that set.
Well, and I doubt that was probably something that they wanted to, like they didn't be like, listen, so you're going to hold her down by her chest.
Right.
But that was, I thought, always like a really freaky scene too, because then like the chair spins around and the door opens and it's the demon dog, and like the chair whips her into it. And you never see the dog like inhabiting like what has to happen for them to,
Well, Sigourney Weaver sells it. Though,
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Just absolutely sells that horror.
Yeah.
But-
They're really lucky. I think Sigourney Weaver doesn't get enough credit in this movie, but she plays essentially what is the audience, right?
Yeah.
The skeptic, but willing to go along with what's going on, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
she plays, like the character who is 100% straightforward. You understand who Dana Barrett is, and the kookiness of everything else going around her is kind of like you go through the journey as Dana Barrett for the most part.
I always loved the delivery of the line 4 feet above the covers.
Yeah. Okay. That was also probably the first time I was ever like, wait, what are these characters doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
And like a couple things I want to mention about that. Number one, so Peter does bed Dana when she is a demon, right? Like,
okay.
are we to assume that?
That's right.
Because
think
he
so.
looks like a disheveled, and then I think he gives her like some kind of a sedative afterwards.
No, I'm sorry. I'll have to go watch it again. My read as a kid, but this could just be totally wrong, was that it's just that she's kind of wild, and he can tell that something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, she's like sort of on him, trying to like mate almost, right?
Because she thinks he's the key master.
Right. I think he can tell right away, and that he just like is disheveled from like dealing with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the implication is that they have slept together in that moment, but I could be totally wrong. I have not watched that scene in decades.
Okay, so let's move a little bit forward to the scene where she does encounter Louis Tully, who is the keymaster. By the way, keymaster gatekeeper, you know what you're doing when you wrote that. I take it that they did bump uglies.
I think something seemed to have happened.
Right, and so now the key is in the gate and they can open it up for Zool. I still think that the effects on the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man are phenomenal. Like, it is so good. And what a creative way to include that, the traveler is chosen. I didn't say anything. I didn't think anything. Did you think of anything? Did you think of anything? And then he turns to Ray and he goes, Ray. And he goes, all I could think of was the pitch man for Stay Puft Marshmallows sitting around the campfire. So they end up fighting the Marshmallow Man. They cross the streams. This is also a great movie where it's like these people are willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. And Walter Peck, as the guy, that's the character's name, who plays the EPA dude who shows up. One of the all-time great smarmy
Dickless
villains.
Wonder.
Yeah, he's just great. It's like, can I see this containment unit? May I? What? May I? May I see this containment unit, please? No, you may not. It's just like they do such a great job. So I love that first Ghostbusters movie. The second Ghostbusters movie, I also really get into, I love the fact that they include a baby with it. Like Dana has this kid, but it's not Peter's kid. It's just like another random baby, and he gets to be the father on that side. Why have we not talked about Janine yet, too? Because this is a character who drastically changes between Ghostbusters 1 and Ghostbusters 2. And I think Annie Potts is like, listen, I can make her more interesting, right? Yeah. And the version that we get in Ghostbusters 2 is the Janine that I am more familiar with. I think that's the one I like the most. In the first one, she's an overworked secretary. In this one, she's kind of, she's got different hair and she's got very 80s in her look. And then you find out that Louis is, in love with her. The scene where Rick Moranis stops Janine in the street, he's like, "Do you want to have something to eat with me?" And like, it's crazy. And they've got throwaway lines that are fantastic. When Louis and Janine are watching baby Oscar, and then Dana comes home and she's like, "Everything okay?" Be like, "Yeah, he was a little fussy, so we gave him some French bread pizza, but he's asleep." And just like out of nowhere, they like, "Do you want to play Super Mario Brothers?" And it's just it's wonderful.
So my question from the first one then is with Rick Moranis, the party scene. He's throwing a party for his clients, and we have this one
So
long.
it's tax deductible.
It's one long. Is it one shot or is it multiple shots? But it's like it follows him in. And now my understanding is that scene was improvised by
Yes.
Moranis.
And he's explaining, so he takes a couple's a couple's coats. He goes, "Hey everyone, this is Ted and Mary. Ted runs a small, a small like shop business, and Mary's a dietitian." And so he introduces everybody by what their occupation is. And then he finally gets up to that like really pretty girl, and she's like, "Louis, this isn't fun. I'm gonna leave. No one's dancing." He's like, "Well, maybe if we start dancing." And then he like just starts like moving his arms and legs. I'm telling you, like as a comedy, these things are so well put together, and they're just juggernauts. And Ivan Reitman should get a lot of credit here, because I think you could do what Judd Apatow is doing today, which is sort of like, I've got these creative people, I'm just going to let them run around,
Right.
and I'll cut whatever I need. But he kept like it grounded. Also, could you imagine working with a group of people who are known for improvising, but also knowing that like your effects shots are going to be a nightmare if you don't hit certain marks?
Can you imagine? There's got to be some like canister of film somewhere that has all of the unused takes of Moranis going through that party and doing that piece. And what a gold mine of like historical value. Like that's the kind of thing that I hope we start getting in some way, where all of these gigantic conglomerates that own all of these titles are able to basically, they're always looking, all right, how else do we squeeze blood out of this diamond?
Right.
And it's going to be, I don't want to get us too far afield. I mean, we're going to have different AI versions of stuff at some point. At some point in the future, you'll be able to go, show me the John Belushi version of Ghostbusters, right? And AI will be able to generate something like that for you.
There's a dog outside our studio. Do you see this dog?
I do. I couldn't tell.
Is there
a
person out there?
I was trying to read your body. Yeah, there's a person.
Okay,
with that
good,
dog.
good.
I was trying to read your body language, and I was like, "Are we about to be attacked? What's going on?"
I saw a little tiny puff of hair go by the window, and I was like, I think that's a dog.
I think it's someone who works here.
Okay.
Because she and this dog were inside, and then
Okay, good.
went outside.
So the dog just got outside.
Yeah.
I see.
brand manager.
So
Who's the dog?
Ghostbusters 2 comes out, and Bill Murray, notorious for like, I don't want to do any more of these. I'm done. I am done with these. Like, and he's a prickly guy to work with, my understanding, in that he gives you something that's amazing, but he is very much into his own space. And,
Right.
You could call it the mad genius, but I think in all honesty, at one point you just have to say like, you're just a weird dude.
He got too
right?
big for his britches,
He
at
did.
some point. And
it's right after this that he makes a movie called Quick Change, where it was with Gina Davis, and Gina Davis talks about how he like yelled at her on set one time. And like right now in 2024, Bill Murray is not the number one star that he used to be, and he's actually taken a lot of heat for his inability to be a team player on set.
Sure.
And so I do think it's probably the best time then to make a Ghostbusters movie, because he needs Ghostbusters more than Ghostbusters might need him. So Ghostbusters 2 comes out. People still have Ghostbusters fever, and that's where the Ghostbusters animated series comes in. Now, this is an interesting fact. They couldn't call the animated series the Ghostbusters because there's already both an animated and live action TV show from back in the day called The Ghostbusters, where it's two comedians and a gorilla.
Live action?
Live action. They did a live action, like there's like 7 or 8 episodes of The Ghostbusters.
No kidding.
And you can watch the intro on YouTube, and like it's a man in a gorilla costume, which surprises me that you haven't seen that.
I have never seen this. I'm going to connect to my
because
phone
like
here.
you do love a man in a gorilla costume.
Hell yeah. Everyone should have a gorilla costume.
They should.
Every single home should have at least one gorilla costume.
You
in the
never know when
closet.
you're going to need it. So the animated series, The Real Ghostbusters, which, by the way, when you really had to go for like, what a title, right?
Yeah, like, that's a real fuck you of a title.
It really is. So the animated series comes out, and that spawns a whole new toy line, right? So people are now like enjoying the Ghostbusters toys. None of the original voice cast comes back to do the voice of the Ghostbusters, so you're not portraying yourself. But I think that's fine, because you learn to love the new version of Peter, right? You learn to love the new
Yeah.
version of Egon, and the animated Ghostbusters series has some of the scariest stuff I've ever seen in my entire life. Do you remember the episode where you find out that Egon has been afraid of the boogeyman since he was a kid, and then the boogeyman is the thing that they have to fight in that episode? So it's got a giant head with kind of Joker, Batman the animated series Joker kind of looks to him, but he's got cloven hooves, and he's got this real high voice. It is no joke, one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen, like as a kiddo. So I am a big fan. You're going to show me something?
Oh, I'm
popping
putting
this
it up for
so
us
you can
right
see
now.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, like, and it's great production value on the Ghostbusters television series. I can't remember who the actors are, but like, it's a famous kind of old like couple comedy duo people.
This is from episode 14, Merlin the Magician.
Oh, so Merlin gets to be a part of it.
Right.
And again, man in a gorilla suit. So the animated series comes out, and then we kind of have a lull in Ghostbusters stuff. There's always this talk about a Ghostbusters 3. There's a crazy story about Dan Aykroyd wrote a third Ghostbusters called Ghostbusters Hellbent, and they actually have to go to hell.
I love the idea of that.
Me too, right?
I wish that would have been made at that time.
And they just
went hard into it.
Yeah, and they just never got it. IDW, which is a comic creator, starts doing Ghostbusters comics, and the Ghostbusters comics, by the way, are really good. Like, they tell a very interesting story. We get into the early 2000s, and we start with the Extreme Ghostbusters series, and I think the Extreme Ghostbusters sees Janine and Egon essentially working with a new crew of Ghostbusters.
And these are IDW comics.
IDW comics, and they end up being part of an animated series that comes out too.
Okay.
So
Extreme Ghostbusters.
right, exactly. And ironically, like, the Extreme Ghostbusters takes heat because it is so scary, and like the depictions of these demons and ghosts and hellhounds and stuff like that. People are like, this is too much for kids. And I think they were hoping that our generation would latch onto it, but our generation had just moved on and no longer was watching content, quote unquote, made for kids.
Mm-hmm.
So the Ghostbusters kind of like just die down, right? And there's all this talk about maybe something, maybe something, maybe something. And then we find out that they're going to make Ghostbusters. It's a Ghostbusters reboot that has an all-female cast. And this comes out in 2016. And this is the thing I'm going to say about this movie, because I just rewatched it a couple days ago. This movie is so bad, and it is not because it's an all-female cast. I took a lot of heat when this movie came out from people being like, well, you just don't like it because it's female. And I'm like, no, I don't like it because they gave these very talented actors nothing to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they took a Judd Apatow way of doing this, and so by the time they start improvising, they get so far away from the plot that, like, there's like 7 minutes of this movie that's dedicated to Melissa McCarthy complaining about wonton soup.
Mm-hmm.
And it just doesn't serve anything, right?
Right.
And
It doesn't need a new cast. It needs a new writer-director.
bingo. And Paul Feig comes off of Bridesmaids with a lot of heat, right? So much that he makes the movie The Heat. And they're like, listen, you're our guy. We're going to have you make a new Ghostbusters movie. And it just doesn't hit the mix. There's nothing about it that I find to be entertaining. There's one line that I like in the entire movie, and it's when Kristen Wiig's character figures out that they're going to open up this portal to the ghost world, and she comes and finds Andy Garcia, who's the mayor of New York, and he's having lunch, and she's like, you have to evacuate the city. He's like, oh, no one's evacuating the city. And she goes, why are you being like this? You're like the mayor from Jaws. And he slams his fist down. He goes, don't ever compare me to the mayor from Jaws. And I was like, that's the only funny part, in my opinion, of this whole movie. Leslie Jones tries her hardest.
Mm-hmm.
Kate McKinnon plays this really interesting Egon-like character where she's kind of, like, oh, I'm a weirdo. And it's supposed to be about friendship between Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig because they had been friends, and Kristen Wiig, a ghost, sat at the edge of her bed for a whole year.
Can you imagine if they had, with that exact same cast, but given that to some SNL writers?
Oh, It would have been great.
They would have known how to write for those actors.
Yeah.
Like, they would have been like, okay, this is and just leaned into the cast itself and what makes the cast great versus how do we recreate this economic boom that came out at this one particular point.
And they start doing stuff that we had hoped to see in Ghostbusters movies, right? Like, it's not just the proton packs. They have like a ghost shredder. They have a fist, like a ghost, like a fist proton pack that you could punch them. And then they have this thing where I dislike this the most during the big climactic fight leading up to them, like getting to Times Square. So all they do is they slam ghosts on the ground and then the ghosts disappear. So you're not they're not really trapping ghosts, apparently, like, if you throw enough proton into them, they like disappear. And like, that is the thing that really gets my goat, because it just doesn't make any sense to me. And you can tell that people are in mortal you don't get the scariness of any ghost except for right at the beginning. Now, if I could go back and rewrite this, one of the problems that I think I'd fix right off the bat is the movie opens with a tour of this old mansion, and there's a ghost in the basement of the old mansion. So it feels very much like the opening of the library scene in the first Ghostbusters. And then you find out that Kristen Wiig's character is like at a prestigious university and she wants to get tenure and she doesn't want any of her ghost past coming. And then all of a sudden a book she wrote, it seems like it's moving along so fast. And then when she first interacts with Melissa McCarthy's character, you find out that they used to be friends and they're no longer friends. Well, why not start the movie with both of them on a field trip together as kids at this mansion, and they both have a ghost experience. And so you can find out that the ghosts are the things that really like solidified their friendship. And then they had a splintering later on in life. And so they have to get back together to go to the same mansion to, check this out. Ed Begley Jr. is in the Ghostbusters. By the way, they've renamed it. It was Ghostbusters right when it first came out, but now they've changed it to Ghostbusters Answer the Call.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They've added a subtitle to it?
They have, yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And it makes it worse, in my opinion. Like, they're like, well, we want to step away just a little bit from Ghostbusters. And by the way, this is supposed to happen in the same, like, same universe, different dimension of Ghostbusters, because at the very end, Leslie Jones is listening to, like,
right.
She's like, what's a Zool?
Right.
And so the idea is that they would blend these things together. It's just not a funny movie. And like, the one upside I will say about the 2016